You're listening to Soap Dirt, the latest in television entertainment news.
Hey, Young and the Restless fans. Today, we're going to talk about Ian Ward's twisted past and why he hates the Newmans and which ones he hates specifically. It's Belinda from Soap Dirt, and I've been asked by a few people to do this video, and I've seen a lot of comments where people don't know who he is or why he's teamed up with Jordan. They either don't remember him or weren't watching. So here we go, but if you've not subscribed to our channel, please hit that button. So Ian Ward didn't appear on Y&R until 2014, but his off-screen history dates back to 1980, and it ties into Nikki Newman's sordid past way before she met Victor. Way, way, way back in the day, Nikki was a teenager trying to find work as a model, only to end up being an unwilling call girl. Nikki escaped that situation and joined the New World Brotherhood cult that was led by Ian Ward. Paul Williams later joined the cult with Nikki. He was looking for inner peace at the time. But Ian's cult, like cults are, was not what it appeared to be. And when Nikki and Paul wanted to leave, Ian and his minions wouldn't let them. And in the end, Paul's dad rescued Nikki and Paul. The commune went up in flames, and Ian was arrested and sent to prison. So bear in mind, none of that was on screen. This all came out when Young and the Restless introduced Ian and hired Ray Weiss to play the role, and that started in 2013, I believe. I said earlier 2014, but I think he started it in 2013. We learned about all this culty stuff when Nikki and Paul talked about their past, and she told him Ian Ward was trying to get her pregnant because he wanted an heir. Nikki did get pregnant way back then, but she ran away, gave birth in a convent. The baby was adopted. That baby was Dylan McAvoy, and he had been around town, and then he found out as an adult that Nikki was his mom, and she told him Ian was his dad. That had always been her assumption. So Dylan went looking for his father, and then Ian showed up in Genoa City in 2014. So I'm trying to think about the dates, 2013, 2014. Anyway, Ian had been running another cult called The Path, having gotten out of prison at some point. Ian turned around and blackmailed Nikki for $5 million. Paul arrested him, but Ian got off with a mistrial. And then he returned to harass Nikki, but then Victor had him brutally beaten by these thugs. And then Paul was shot and needed a partial liver transplant. And that's when the truth came out that Paul was Dylan's biological father. They have like AB negative blood, very rare. So Ian turned around and sued Nikki for emotional distress, accusing her of lying to him and Dylan about him being his father. It got really ugly in court, and eventually Ian's case was thrown out, and Victor threatened Ian to never come after the Newmans again, but Ian wasn't done. He published a nasty tabloid story about Nikki's tawdry sex life in the cult. Anyway, it turned out Ian was actually infertile the whole time, and he knew it, but nobody else did. So that's the backstory on him and Nikki. But remember, Ian's been targeting Sharon since July of 2024. So, how does this tie into all that? In a recent interview, showrunner Josh Griffith confirmed that Ian's next target is Mariah Copeland. So now we're going to talk about Mariah and Sharon and Ian. If you're a newer watcher, you may not know Cassie Newman had a crush on older Daniel. I mean, you should have picked up on it with recent stuff. She died from car crash injuries when she drove underage. Daniel had gotten drunk, passed out in his car after a party. Cassie decided to try and drive them home, wrecked the car, so she died at age 14 in 2005. Almost a decade later, Sharon began hallucinating Cassie, kind of like she's doing now, and it freaked her out so bad she went and got electroshock therapy. Turns out she wasn't hallucinating her, it was a real person. Victor had spotted Mariah and had noticed how much she looked like her, looked like Cassie would have looked like. And so he hired Mariah to torment Sharon. And as it turned out, Mariah was also in league with Ian. And, so she was doing shady stuff with Ian and taking money from Victor. And if you don't know, Sharon had Cassie when she was only 16. She gave up her daughter for adoption. She never knew she was carrying twins. That, of course, was a retcon they added at the time. Ian had bought twin Mariah as a baby because, as I said, he was infertile. And Ian raised Mariah as his daughter, with one of the crazy cult members acting as her mom, the crazy cult member that actually was a nurse and had sold Mariah to him. Sharon didn't know why Mariah looked just like Cassie, but was drawn to her, and Sharon kept trying to help her. She got her out of some legal scrapes and made Nick give Mariah a job. All the while, Ian was pressing Mariah to stick close to Sharon and keep using her. And under his direction, basically, Mariah wound up living with Sharon, but she was feeling really guilty about it. And then against Ian's orders, Mariah had developed this crush on Nick, and she was always trying to seduce him, which really creeped Nick out because he had adopted Cassie, who she looked just like. And Sharon caught her like in something really sexy, trying to seduce Nick and throw her out of the house. And when Mariah blew it with Sharon, Ian was really angry, and he did something even more twisted. He drugged Mariah, remember, who he'd raised as a daughter, and forced her to marry him. And Ian also was planning to drug Nikki and kidnap her, but that was thwarted. So Nick and Sharon and the cops rescued Mariah from Ian, thankfully, before it got to the consummating the marriage stage. And by then, Nick and Sharon had figured out that the woman who Mariah thought was her mom had stolen her at birth, sold her to Ian. And this lady was just garbage. She had been in and out of his cult for years. Ian later faked his death and framed Dylan for it to torment Nikki, and then he blackmailed her. Paul caught him, and Ian was arrested yet again. And then about a year later, Ian turned up like a bad penny, conspiring with Adam. This was back in the Justin Hartley days. And they were doing this shady thing with the Newman servers called the Paragon Project. God, it was the dumbest plot. You may have liked it. I didn't. Ian at the time was hiding out in an RV in the woods, and Phyllis stumbled upon him. That was in the Gina Tognoni days. He told her his name was Fred, and they became friends. Adam and Ian then had a falling out because Adam only wanted to target Victor, but Ian wanted to target all the Newmans, even Chelsea and her line at the time, Chelsea 2.0. Phyllis finally figured out who Ian was, and she reported it to Victor, and he went over to the prison to confirm with the warden that Ian had definitely escaped. But in this weird twist, they, said, oh no, he's here. And Victor actually saw Ian behind bars, seemingly still incarcerated. So the guy is super duper tricky, and that's very important to know. Ian escaped again, or just walked out the door again, showed up at the Newman Tower at a Halloween event in 2015. He was dressed up as the devil. He started a fire. He attacked Adam, again, Justin Hartley days. They brawled, and Adam left Ian for dead, pinned under some rubble as the fire was raging. But apparently fire doesn't kill the devil, because Ian survived, and Paul's sister, Crazy Patty Williams, had helped him. He sent her on her way, and he lured Phyllis to his hideout motel room, knowing Victor would come along because she'd alert him. And then, Victor was demanding Ian stop the Paragon Project. And in the end, federal agents arrested Ian, yet another arrest, and he vowed it wasn't over. Then 2016, we get another glimpse of Ian when Victor was sent to prison for kidnapping Jack and having his doppelganger, drug lord Marco Anicelli, take over his life, and was sleeping with Phyllis again in the Gina Tognoni days. And Victor had gotten like a 10-year sentence and was sent to the same prison where Ian was serving time. Ian made out that he was really important in prison, offered Victor protection. The mustache refused, and Victor later got stabbed. And Ian was able to get out of prison for the day to testify against Victor in court, saying he had set up Adam on fake murder charges. He just really wanted to get out of the prison to the courthouse, and he made this escape at the courthouse, took Nikki hostage, and they went to the Abbott cabin. He got hold of Phyllis too. It was very messy. There was more demands for ransom money, stuff like that. And Ian was again caught and carted back to prison. And now we come to the present, 9 years later, and it seems like he is legitimately out on parole. And it looks like he met Jordan Howard while he was incarcerated, and they found out they both hate Victor, and their revenge list has some overlaps. So as to setting up Sharon, remember, Ian raised Mariah as his own, and she turned on him and has been living a happy life with Sharon as her mom, and has put all the cult stuff in Ian and her twisted fake mom behind her. And Phyllis has been a target of his since the mid-20-teens for turning him over to Victor. As for why Ian marked Heather for death, well, it's not about Heather personally. Ian despises Paul because he's Dylan's biological father. He took Nikki away from the cult, and Paul's dad burned down his cult, and Paul arrested Ian probably more times than I can count. 3, 4, maybe 5 times. So killing Heather was more about targeting Paul and setting up Sharon than any specific hatred of Heather herself. She was an easy target and collateral damage to get other things done. Phyllis and Sharon were tormented out of spite, and Mariah is now Ian's next target. And I would not be surprised if Ian came after little Aria too, because he is so twisted and never been able to have kids of his own. And while Jordan is focusing on Claire soon, both she and Ian hate Victor and Nikki, so I'm sure they're going to be targets along the line at some point. So that is pretty much, in a quick nutshell, what you need to know about Ian Ward, and I hope that gives you some context for what's coming out of the twisted mind of Josh Griffith about the twisted mind of Ian Ward.
Thank you for being a loyal listener. Follow us wherever you get your podcast, because you don't want to miss the next episode. Soap Dirt is on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more.